everyone. I'm John Kernan. Coming up on RPM tonight, Ferrari hopes to have its gearbox problem solved in time for the next Formula One race. Al Unser Jr. speaks out on the kart IRL controversy. And Ned Jarrett and Dr. Jerry Punch join us to talk about historic North Wilkesboro Speedway. But first, testing continues at NASCAR's other charter member racetrack, the Martinsville Speedway. Tuesday, 8 teams took to the track to test for next week's Goodies 500, including Rookie of the Year candidate Johnny Benson Jr. His team plans to spend Tuesday and Wednesday at the track shaking down this car. Benson failed to qualify for the last race at Bristol, so the Pennzoil Pontiac crew wants to be ready when they roll into Martinsville.
We had a problem at Bristol qualifying, so putting a big emphasis on qualifying, getting them in the race, and then we plan on running some long runs. We did a test at North Wilkesboro last week and worked on both qualifying and racing. You got to work on a race setup, but qualifying so tight now, 0.3 of a second. It's pretty important.
As parity grows in NASCAR Winston Cup racing, the search for an edge over your competitors becomes more and more fierce. Many teams look for that edge during test sessions, taking place on tracks as large as Talladega and as small as Martinsville. And while each veteran team is allowed just 7 tests a season, how do you make sure that you're getting the most from your time?
Basically, we come here, we got a setup in mind, and we just try different stuff, something that you don't think will work, well, it might work, and it's not like you're here to race and you're real push for time, and you got all day long, you can change stuff and, see what does what, and just really, work the car out all day long.
Well, you work on certain parts of the corner. First you start working on the entry of the corner. You get the car comfortable there. You start working on the middle part of the corner. If you get that, working well, you try to work on the exit of the corner. You get one of those that you really like, and then you start slowly trying to piece it together.
That goes on as soon as he makes his lap. So we give him a couple of minutes, and he comes in and tells us what he'd like to have or what he'd like the car to feel like or what the car's doing. See, that's what you always try to do, is give the driver what he wants. We can say we're smarter than he is, but we're not. I mean, he's got to drive the car, so we try to give him everything he wants. And if he's loose getting in the corner and tight coming off, we've got to work on that. Or if he's loose at both ends, we can work on that. But when you get a push-loose situation, at some of these racetracks, it's really hard to correct both of them.
If he says it's doing something, it's doing it. Now, whether it's doing it because he's running a different line or he's doing something to it, he's very open about that. Again, that's why you're testing, because we know that our combination's never been right here. The driver can have as much input on what the car does. It'll react to the way you drive it, where you use the brakes, where you turn the steering wheel, and we've proven that week after week. If Jeff has searched for different lines, and we've had to adjust the car around it, and ended up being the most efficient setup for speed and for wear on the tires.
We've done so much communication, here this week. Try something, see if it's a little better. And if it's not better, then we try what was better to make sure we didn't get a false reading on something. I've learned more here yesterday and today than probably all the other tests put together.
In Formula One news, it wasn't until after the race that officials learned what caused the fire on Pedro Diniz's car during Sunday's race. A preliminary investigation revealed that the return valve had stuck open. That allowed fuel to spill out onto the tires and the engine, which ignited the fuel. That resulted in a spectacular fireball. Fortunately, Diniz was able to get out of the car okay. The incident happened a few laps after Diniz had collided with Luca Badwar. Diniz then pitted for fuel. Officials do not know if that on-track collision damaged the return valve. So far this season, no team has stepped up to challenge the Williams team, but James Allen reports that by the next race, the Ferraris should have their gearbox problem fixed, which should lead to a more competitive rest of the season.
The Argentine Grand Prix really saw the resurrection of the Ferrari team. Michael Schumacher qualified within 0.2 of a second of Damon Hill and ran a very strong second place in the race until his rear wing fell off. Now, his performance is all the more impressive when you consider that he was actually using a hybrid car, the rear end of a 95 car married to the front end of the 96. Go back to the Melbourne Grand Prix, the first race of the season. Ferrari turns up with its brand new car, but suffers severe gearbox problems, cracking of the gearbox casing. So for the Argentine and the Brazilian Grand Prix, the decision was taken to marry the old 1995 gearbox to the front end of the 1996 car. Schumacher's performance here in Argentina certainly suggests that when they get the new gearbox in 3 weeks' time at the Nürburgring, that car should be fairly competitive. But that isn't the end of the story. You remember a few weeks ago on RPM, we told you about the aerodynamic problems that many teams have been suffering because of the new high cockpit side regulations in Formula One. The big problem they're all suffering is the flow of air over the driver's head and into the airbox. Now, Williams and Jordan moved the rollover bar back, and so that's why they're not struggling, and that's why they've got the performance advantage. Ferrari, Benetton, they're all having the same problem. And this week, Ferrari will make a decision whether to build a brand new car, move the rollover bar back. Well, it could take several months. It will certainly cost several $1 million, but unfortunately, that is the price of progress in Formula One.
Thank you, James. So far, Eddie Irvine has posted the most consistent numbers for the Ferraris this season. He's averaged a 5th-place finish in the last 3 races, while world champion Michael Schumacher's best run has been a 3rd at Brazil. In the other 2 races, Schumacher's experienced problems, a broken rear wing at Argentina, while brake trouble sidelined him at Australia. In IndyCar notes, the Pac West Racing Group has chosen Teo Fabi to drive in relief for the injured Mark Blundell. Fabi drove for Forsyth Racing last season and finished 9th in the PPG IndyCar point standings. More than likely, this will be a 1-race deal for Fabi, as Blundell is expected to be at full strength in time for the next race at Nazareth. Coming up on RPM tonight, Little Al up close with Chris Myers. And Ned Jarrett and Jerry Punch are here to talk about North Wilkesboro and history.
RPM Tonight is being brought to you by McDonald's. Have you had your break today?
Don't forget to watch all the excitement of the First Union 400 live Sunday afternoon at 1 from North Wilkesboro, North Carolina. Last year, Dale Earnhardt proved to be the class of the field, beating Jeff Gordon by more than half a lap. That's this Sunday afternoon, live on ESPN. North Wilkesboro Speedway hosted its first NASCAR race on October 16, 1949. Since that time, the track has run 91 Winston Cup races, and there have been 37 different drivers win at the Speedway. But there's talk that this could be the last Winston Cup race at the track, so we asked the drivers what they thought about that.
You know, it's going around in the garage area, those thoughts. The fact that it could be the last event at North Wilkesboro, and you know, that makes it all that much more enticing for a driver to go up there and want to run well at.
It's sad in a way, but it's, you know, there's, everybody's heard of growing pains, and that might be one of the growing pains of this sport.
I know progress sometimes will squash the little guy and push him out of the way, and Wilkesboro is kind of the little guy in this business right now, with seating, access to get to, with the roads, you know, and all that, but despite all that, it's a great racetrack.
North Wilkesboro is just another track on the schedule to us, and if it's on there next year, if it's not on there, then you know, we'll just go wherever NASCAR wants us to go.
It is a tough place, so the more the tougher places we can get rid of, it will suit me fine. It's a bad way to say it, but this business is so competitive nowadays, and when you get on a track like Wilkesboro where times are so close, it's really tough. So, you know, we'll just have to play it by ear and see what happens.
It's going to be a little emotional, I think, because they're talking of maybe moving the dates from up there, so we need to go up there and win this race, so if they do, we can be the guy that won the last race there. It's a good racetrack.
Well, Ned Jarrett and Dr. Jerry Punch join us now. And Jerry, we've heard all the rumors. What have you heard? Is this going to be the last Winston Cup race in North Wilkesboro?
John, like everyone else, you know, I certainly hope the fact that I hope that NASCAR can continue to go to Wilkesboro for years to come, but we're all hearing that it isn't the case. And as you heard Dale Earnhardt say a moment ago when we were visiting yesterday, the drivers, even the drivers, think this could be the last one, and now that makes this race even that more special. I mean, Darrell Waltrip, who won so many there, Richard Petty no longer drives, and but the guys who've won up there, I mean, Mark Martin, Terry Labonte, they all want to win this one because it could be the last time they go.
Now, Ned, you ran there when it was dirt, and then also when after they had paved it, so you know the history of the track. Plus, you're from that area. Now, how would you feel about it if they don't run a Winston Cup race there anymore?
Well, certainly it'll be sad to see it go off the schedule because there is so much tradition there. A lot of great races over the years, a lot of great drivers have driven on that racetrack, but when we look at the sport and where it has been headed for the last 5 years and where we predict it'll be headed in the next 10 years, then, you know, things have to change. It's not that much unlike back in the early 70s when Winston came along and the schedule was pared from 50 to 60 races down to 30. I was managing the Hickory Speedway at that time and was a victim. We hated to see the Winston Cup, or what is now Winston Cup, go away from our track at Hickory, North Carolina, but we knew it was the best thing for the sport.
And Ned, you raced on that track back when it was dirt. Of course, the banking was different back years ago, and also when it was paved. How has the track changed over the years?
Well, you still got uphill on the back stretch and downhill on the front stretch, that's for sure, and it has always been a tough racetrack to get around. A real challenge for the driver and the crew to set the car up to get around there. Of course, you know, we'll look for challenges when we go to a track, but as one of the drivers said there, they won't miss it from that standpoint.
Now, Ned, a couple of Winston Cup championships for you, won a lot of races, but never won one at North Wilkesboro. But I guess I recall 1964, you came close. What happened that year?
Came awfully close. Had a good race car up there, and they had put a sealer on it. We called it bear grease back then, and that was in the early days of the sealers. We didn't really know what it would do for the racetrack, and I went barreling off down into turn one, either in practice or qualifying. I don't remember that part, but anyway, destroyed my good race car. And we had no choice but to go back to Camden, South Carolina. I was driving for Bondi Long at the time, and get a backup car, and the only backup car we had was a dirt car. Dirt track car. We brought it up there, started in the rear, and 5 more laps we would have won the race. Fred Lorenzen won the race, but we, in that dirt track car, came from the back to second place, and that's as close as we ever came to winning.
You were that strong. Well, I got to ask both of you guys. I mean, Jerry, you also grew up in that area, and I guess I'll start with you. What's your favorite memory about North Wilkesboro?
Well, John, I have a lot of them. You know, I used to do a little PA there when I was in medical school. I'd sneak off up there to do PA, and I enjoyed that part of it. And I actually ran the scoreboard. Back in my early years, I stood on the turns. You had to turn the little lap dials lap by lap, and I ran the scoreboard for a while until a big wham one day, and I looked up, and there was a hole in the scoreboard where a piece had come off one of the cars coming in at turn 3, and that taught me I never wanted to be the guy that ran the scoreboard. But I think within the past year and a half, being there when Ernie Irvin climbed back in that race car and seeing the emotion that Ernie had and Kim and the outpouring of humanity, all the emotion in the crowd for what he had overcome and the way he ran that day and came back and had a good finish or had a good run, that was a special memory that I won't forget.
What about you, Ned?
Well, there's certainly a lot of memories over the years, and some that sticks in your mind is in the early days of racing. Of course, Wilkes County, North Carolina was known as the moonshine capital of the world at one time, and it was not uncommon to sit there on Sunday after, or stand in the pits and see fans sitting up in the grandstand with the bottle of moonshine sitting between their legs, and they were there to enjoy the race. And you see a lot of fights break out up there in those grandstands too.
Well, Benny Parsons, what he saw the first race there. How early do you remember going to North Wilkesboro to see races, Ned?
I saw races there in the late 40s. Certainly, I didn't race there I think until the early 50s, maybe 52 or 53, but saw some races there in the late 40s.
All right. Well, I appreciate the fact that you guys came on and talked about it. I know Jerry had told us last week that you were going fishing with Earnhardt and wouldn't be back until Wednesday, but you got back early, and you're going to have Jerry will have something on that fishing trip with Earnhardt for tomorrow. Once again, thanks a lot, guys. You had something to add real quick?
No, I was going to say, if you're waiting for the fish that I caught, you see them right in front of you.
So, a really good day for Jerry. Thanks again to Ned and Jerry. Still to come on RPM tonight, Tony Stewart graduates from the midgets to IndyCars, among other series. Mark your calendars for this Wednesday. Thunder returns to ESPN2 live from Ventura, California. The USAC Midgets Wednesday night at 11 o'clock Eastern. Thunder on the Deuce. You probably remember seeing Tony Stewart running up front on Thunder last year. He won't be there when the season kicks off Wednesday night. That's because he's busy not only preparing for the Indy 500, but for his NASCAR career as well. Sally Larvick has that story.
When Tony Stewart took a last-minute ride with Menard Racing, everyone knew the 24-year-old driver was good. But they just didn't know how good he was until he finished second at Orlando after starting from the back of the field.
The guy showed up. He never asked me one time how fast any of his teammates were going, what position he was in as far as during practice, in my 8th quick and my 10th quick. He focused on the job at hand. He went out, and in the race, when he took the lead, I was shocked.
Like any good driver, when Stewart isn't driving an Indy car, he's racing anything he can. Last year, he became the first driver to win 3 racing titles in the same year: midget, sprint, and Silver Crown championships.
I'm pretty active as far as some of the drivers that are here, you know, with my midget and sprint car commitments, and I've got a full Busch Grand National schedule also that I'm working on, so I've stayed active as a driver.
The ease at which Stewart has taken to an Indy car is reminiscent of other driving greats.
I got to compare Tony a little bit to Al Sr. When Al drove for us and almost won at the Speedway. Tony seems to have that natural instinct for knowing where trouble's going to occur and how to stay out of it, and when to run hard and maybe when not to run so hard.
One of the most talented drivers for just pure skill in a race car was Jacques Villeneuve, not the Jacques that we saw running the Formula One race, but his uncle. Tony Stewart, to me, is the closest guy that I've had since Jacques Villeneuve that's on that level. I mean, the kid has an incredible feel for the race car.
After the Phoenix race, Tony is currently 6th in the points, but he's got a chance to change all that this May, as he hopes to realize his dream of becoming the winner of the 80th Indianapolis 500-mile race.
Ever since I was old enough to know what a race car was and, you know, had the dreams of running race cars, this is where I wanted to be.
Here's a look at the Stewart file: 2 Indy Racing League events and 3 races on the NASCAR Busch Series this year. His best finish in a stock car, Bristol, where he finished 16th after starting 7th. And, of course, his best finish of the year, 2nd in the IRL opener at Orlando. Coming up on RPM tonight, Al Unser Jr. speaks out on the Indianapolis 500.
The best drivers in the world need to be at the best race in the world, which is Indy.
The Deuce gets you up to date with final round IndyCar qualifying from Long Beach Saturday night at 6:30 Eastern. Michael Andretti set the one-lap record last year at 52.482 seconds. That translates into a little more than 109 miles an hour. Qualifying Saturday night, 6:30 on ESPN2. In this week's rearview mirror, they call him King of the Beach, Al Unser Jr. He first won at Long Beach in 1988 and kept winning through 1991. Unser, who's not considered a good qualifier, has held the pole there twice, and in the last 12 years, he started no worse than 7th. In 1994, Unser started 2nd and stayed in front of then series rookie Nigel Mansell for the win.
Al Unser Jr. about to reassert himself as the King of the Beach as he takes the Penske car across the line and picks up the twin checkered flags.
Unser came into the 1995 race struggling, with 6th as his best finish on the year. He started 4th and held off Scott Pruitt for the victory.
Now, they used to call you the King of the Beach. After this victory, what do we have to start calling Al Unser Jr.?
Just Al. That's fine.
Last week, Little Al sat down with Chris Myers for an up-close interview. Just in case you missed it over on ESPN, here's a shortened version in which Unser discusses the ongoing kart IRL controversy.
Will this get worse before it gets better? Can this be resolved within a year or 2 of this kind of same-day racing?
Well, you know, I'm an optimist, and I hope it gets resolved before this year's Indy 500.
There's still that chance.
Well, you know, it's very, very slim, but, you know, we've won races from the back of the field before, so, you know, anything's possible in auto racing, and so, but I think it'll get figured out soon because, you know, the best drivers in the world need to be at the best race in the world, which is Indy.
But what's the racing fan to do? Do they go where the driver is, or do they go to the famous speedway?
Well, if I was a racing fan, I'd want to go see the best drivers in the world compete because they're the ones that are the best drivers. They're going to put on the best show. They're going to be driving the best equipment, and they're going to be the show to watch. Really, the fans are going to decide this one. That's who's going to decide everything.
Is that good?
Yes, very much so. It's the fans that are being hurt right now, like in the IRL race at Phoenix. There wasn't a whole lot of fans there, and so on, and so you know, at Indy this year, the fans will get to see what has happened to their sport and so on.
All right, the Unser family, with you included, 9 Indy 500 titles. Shouldn't your loyalty be at Indy?
My loyalty is at Indy.
Do you fear that that you may never have that feeling again at Indy. It may not mean the same because of the division.
Well, I tell you, you know, with the way that everything is and the competition and all that kind of stuff, if you can win this US 500, it's going to be an impressive win, you know, because the best in the world are going to be there, and those are my competitors, and that's who I want to race against. I don't want to race against B teams or second-rate teams and so on that's going to show up at Indy this year. So.
It's the new Indy 500. The US 500, can we say that?
You bet, you bet. It's going to have, the tradition's going to grow with the US 500, and, you know, it's going to be a great race because the best are going to be competing against the best.
Will the fans buy into that? Will it take time? I mean, Indy has the tradition. We're talking 80 years.
Yeah, and it's going to take a few years to mess that up, you know.
And it will be messing it up.
They're playing with fire right now, and the Speedway could get burned in an awful bad way, and none of us want that. Like I said earlier, you know, the loyalties are there, but I want to race against the best and the best teams and all that, and that's going to be at the US 500.
Even though Unser missed the 500 last year, he's had some impressive runs there over the years. Unser won in 92 and 94, but look how many laps he completed in the 500 from 1989 through 94. 1,195 out of a possible 1,200. We'll be right back after Tuesday's Fast Fact.
RPM Tonight is being brought to you by Splitfire. Enter the performance zone with Splitfire Performance V spark plugs. By Firestone, America's tire since 1900. And by the American Express corporate card, giving you the freedom to do what you do best.
Wednesday on RPM Tonight, Dr. Jerry Punch goes fishing with the 7-time Winston Cup champion, Dale Earnhardt. Funny car fast man Chuck Etchels joins us to talk about the upcoming Winston Select Invitational at Rockingham and an in-depth look at NASCAR Super Teams. Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. The Deuce brings you qualifying from North Wilkesboro Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock Eastern. Last year, Jeff Gordon won the pole with a lap of 18.945 seconds, 118.765 miles an hour. That's qualifying for the first Union 400 live Friday afternoon right here on ESPN2. One final bit of good news to give you before we leave you. Eliseo Salazar has been cleared to get back into the race car. We expect him to begin testing next week at Indianapolis. We are out of time for now, but we'll see you back here Wednesday night. Good night, everybody.